The slap echoed across the manicured lawn of Havenwood High. It was sharp, ugly, a sound that cut through the afternoon chatter of students leaving for the day. Kyle Thorne's hand left a bright red mark on Sarah's cheek. She stumbled back, her book spilling onto the grass. He stood over her, his face a mask of arrogant rage. A circle of students had formed, their phones held up, small red lights blinking, recording, watching, doing nothing. Her dog, Smoke, a magnificent German shepherd with a coat the color of twilight, had been sitting patiently by the curb. At the sound of the slap, he was on his feet. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound like distant thunder. He moved between Sarah and the boy, not attacking but planting himself firmly. A living shield. Kyle Thorne laughed, a cruel barking sound. "Get that stupid mutt out of my face." He drew back his foot, clad in an expensive leather boot, and kicked Smoke hard in the ribs. The dog yelped, a sharp cry of pain, and collapsed, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Sarah screamed. Before we continue, it is worth asking where you are watching this from, what small town or big city you call home. Because stories like this happen everywhere. They happen in the quiet places where everyone knows everyone, and they happen in the bustling cities where no one knows anyone at all. They begin with an act of cruelty, a moment of injustice witnessed by many, but stopped by none. Subscribe and stay with us until the end, because what happens next is a reminder that even when the world looks away, there are those who will not. John Kane saw it all from his truck. He had been parked across the street, waiting to pick up Sarah. He was her guardian, a promise made to her father, his teammate, before a dusty street in a forgotten country had claimed him. Kane's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. The world around him seemed to slow down, the sounds fading until all he could hear was the thumping in his own chest. It was a familiar rhythm, the prelude to violence. He had lived with that rhythm for a decade in the Navy, as a SEAL. He had come to this quiet town to escape it, to find a silence that the world of men and war had stolen from him. But the rhythm had found him anyway. He was out of the truck in an instant. He did not run. He moved with a purpose that was more intimidating than any sprint. His steps were measured, eating up the distance across the asphalt. The students parted for him, a silent wave breaking against a stone. They saw the look on his face. It was not anger. It was something colder, harder. It was the look of a man who had made a decision. Kyle Thorne, still posturing over the fallen dog and the crying girl, did not see him coming until Kane was right there. "That's enough," Kane said. His voice was quiet. It was not a shout. "Are you?" Kane ignored him. His focus was, "Are you?" Kane ignored him. His focus was on Sarah, who was now kneeling beside Smoke, her hands hovering over the dog's side, afraid to touch him. He knelt beside her. He ran a practiced hand over Smoke's ribs, his fingers gentle but firm. The dog whimpered, but licked his hand weakly. Kane could feel the broken bones beneath the fur. A surge of cold, black rage washed through him. He controlled it. He had to. For her. "He's hurt," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He kicked him." "I know," Kane said, his voice still low. He looked up at Kyle Thorne, and for the first time, the boy saw what was in the man's eyes. It was not the anger of a frustrated parent. It was something ancient and lethal. The boy took an involuntary step back. "My father owns this town." Kyle spat, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. It was a shield, and a weak one. Kane did not acknowledge the statement. He scooped the 70-pound German shepherd into his arms as if he weighed nothing. Smoke groaned, but rested his head against Kane's chest. Kane stood, his gaze locked on Kyle. "This is over," Kane said. Not a threat, a promise. He turned and walked back toward his truck, Sarah trailing behind him, her small hand clutching the back of his jacket. The circle of students dissolved, their phones suddenly feeling heavy in their hands. They had filmed the cruelty. Now they had filmed the arrival of its consequence. The drive to the veterinarian was silent. Kane focused on the road, his jaw tight. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, her gaze fixed on Smoke, who lay across the back seat breathing shallowly. She was the daughter of Mike Deuce Peterson, Kane's best friend and swim buddy through BUD/S. Mike had died in Kane's arms, his last words a plea. "Take care of my girl, Johnny. Don't let the world break her." Kane had failed to keep her from being hurt. He would not fail to get her justice. At the clinic, Dr. Evans, a kind woman with tired eyes, confirmed his fears. 2 broken ribs, one of them splintered. Internal bruising. "He's a strong dog," she said, looking at the x-rays. "But this was a vicious kick. What happened?" Kane's eyes met hers. "A coward," he said simply. He paid the bill in cash and arranged for Smoke to stay overnight for observation. He drove Sarah home to the small house he had rented on the edge of town. It was a simple place, but it was clean and it was safe. Or it had been. Inside, Sarah sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, looking small and lost. Kane made her a cup of tea, his movements economical and precise. He placed it on the coffee table in front of her. "I should have done something," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He's always like that. He thinks he can do whatever he wants." "This is not on you, Sarah," Kane said, his voice gentle but firm. "This is on him, and on everyone who stood by and let it happen." He sat in the armchair opposite her. The silence stretched between them, filled with the unspoken weight of the day. "Your dad," Kane began, then stopped. He rarely spoke of Mike. The memories were too sharp, but he had to now. "Your dad was the bravest man I ever knew. He never backed down from a fight if it was the right thing to do. That courage is in you, too. I see it." Sarah looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. "What are we going to do?" Kane leaned forward, his forearms on his knees. He looked directly into her eyes, making a connection that was as binding as any contract. "We are going to make this right," he said. "He will not get away with this. Not this time, not with you. I promise you, Sarah, this ends now." It was a promise sealed in the quiet living room of a rented house, a promise witnessed only by the ghosts of fallen friends. It was a promise that would shake the foundations of a town built on secrets and fear. Later that night, Kane's phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered, the speaker on. "Is this Mr. Kane?" The voice was smooth, cultured, dripping with condescension. "This is Kane. My name is Marcus Thorne. I believe you had an unfortunate interaction with my son today. Your son assaulted a child and brutalized an animal," Kane stated, his voice flat. A sigh on the other end of the line. "Boys will be boys. There seems to have been a misunderstanding. Kyle can be passionate. I'd like to resolve this amicably. I'm prepared to cover all the veterinary bills, of course, and offer some additional compensation for the girl's distress. Let's say $50,000. That should make this all go away." Kane was silent for a moment. He looked at the empty dog bed in the corner of the room. He thought of Smoke lying in a metal cage at the vet's office. He thought of the red mark on Sarah's face. "You think you can buy your way out of this?" Kane said. It was not a question. "Mr. Kane," Thorne said, his voice hardening slightly. "Everyone has a price. I'm offering you a generous one. I suggest you take it. This town can be a very lonely place for people who don't understand how things work." The threat was veiled, but unmistakable. Kane's response was cold and precise. "You're right about one thing, Thorne. It is a lonely place, but I'm not the one who should be worried." He hung up the phone. The war had begun. The next morning, Kane drove Sarah to the Havenwood police station. It was a small brick building that looked more like a library than a bastion of law and order. The officer at the desk, a heavy-set man with a bored expression, listened to their story with a distinct lack of interest. "Kyle Thorne, you say?" the officer said, tapping his pen on the counter. He did not write anything down. "Look, kids get into scuffles. It happens." "He assaulted her," Kane said, his voice dangerously low. "He broke my dog's ribs. There were dozens of witnesses. People filmed it." "Witnesses?" The officer chuckled. "No one's filed a report? And phone videos? They don't prove anything. Look, I'd advise you to just let this go. The Thornes are important people in this community. They are benefactors of the police department's annual ball, aren't they?" Kane asked. The officer's face flushed. "I'm telling you for your own good. Drop it." They left the station and went to the school principal's office. The result was the same. Principal Thompson wrung his hands, spoke of Kyle's difficult home life, and the Thorne family's generous donations to the new gymnasium. He suggested Sarah might have provoked the incident. It was clear. The system was not broken. It was owned. Kane saw the hope draining from Sarah's face. "They were all scared of him," she said in the truck on the way home. "Yes," Kane said. "They are. That's how he operates. Fear is his currency." "So he wins?" "No," Kane said, turning onto their street. "He just made the rules clear. We can't use his game board, so we'll use our own." The harassment started that afternoon. A picture of Sarah, crudely photoshopped with cruel words, appeared on a local gossip page on social media. By evening, their front lawn was littered with trash. Someone had spray-painted the word "liar" on their mailbox. Kane cleaned it up without a word, but he also installed a series of new cameras around the property, small, discreet, military-grade. He activated a perimeter sensor system. He was not a civilian anymore. He was an operator. His home was now an outpost. He spent the evening on his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He was digging, using the open-source intelligence skills the teams had taught him. Marcus Thorne, Thorne Development, a web of LLCs, shell corporations, and political donations. He owned half the businesses in town, held the mortgages on the other half. The police chief, the mayor, the school principal, all had received consulting fees or sat on the boards of Thorne-affiliated charities. Clear's throat. There is a difference between a problem and a target. A problem is complex, overwhelming, tangled. A target is simple. It has a structure, a center of gravity, a weakness. Kane looked at the intricate diagram he had sketched out on a notepad. Marcus Thorne was not a problem. He was a target, and Kane knew how to dismantle a target. The next day, Kyle Thorne and two of his friends cornered Sarah as she was taking out the trash. They didn't touch her. They just stood there, blocking her path, their presence a physical threat. "You should have taken the money," Kyle sneered. "My dad can make your life a living hell. This is just the beginning." From the porch, the front door opened. Kane stepped out. He said nothing. He just stood there, his arms crossed. His presence was enough. The boy's bravado evaporated. They backed away, muttering threats, and disappeared down the street. Kane knew this was an escalation, a test. They were probing his defenses, seeing how far they could push. That night, he made the call. He dialed a number from memory, a satellite phone connection that was always active. It rang twice. "Go for Reaper," a gravelly voice answered. "Reaper, it's Kane." There was a pause, then a warm laugh. "Johnny boy, I was wondering when you'd get tired of the quiet life. What's the situation?" Kane laid it out. The girl, the dog, the father, the promise, the untouchable tyrant who thought his money made him a king. He spoke for 10 minutes, his voice a flat monotone, detailing the facts without emotion. When he was done, the line was silent for a long moment. "He hurt a kid, Johnny?" Reaper asked, his voice now devoid of any warmth. "A fallen brother's kid?" "Yes." "And he hurt your dog?" "Yes." "All right, we're in. Ghost is with me, and I can get Doc. What do you need?" "Everything," Kane said. "This isn't a smash and grab. This is a siege. The whole town is a hostile network. I need surveillance, intel, legal support. I need to dismantle his entire empire." "Consider it done," Reaper said. "Ghost is already geolocating Thorne's digital footprint. Send me a list of what you need. We'll be dark, off the grid. Your command. We're your team." "Thank you," Kane said, a weight lifting from his shoulders. He was not alone anymore. "Don't thank us," Reaper said. "This is what we do. We take care of our own. Go to work, Johnny. We've got your 6. The next day, 2 unmarked vans pulled up to Kane's house in the pre-dawn darkness. Reaper and Ghost stepped out. Reaper was built like a refrigerator, a mountain of a man with a surprisingly gentle smile, which was currently absent. Ghost was leaner, a wiry man with eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He was already holding a tablet, its screen displaying a satellite overlay of Havenwood. "Thorne's got a weak digital security posture," Ghost said, skipping any pleasantries. "Arrogant. Thinks firewalls are for little people. I'm already inside his company's server. It's a mess of dirty laundry." Reaper clapped Kane on the shoulder. "Doc's on his way. He's bringing the house call kit. In the meantime, we brought you some party favors." He opened the back of the van, revealing Pelican cases filled with encrypted radios, thermal imagers, long-range listening devices, and other tools of their former trade. The house was no longer just an outpost. It was now a command center. While Ghost built a digital fortress around their communications and a digital battering ram to tear down Thorne's, Kane and Reaper went to work on the human element. Kane had a name from his research: Maria Vance, an investigative reporter for the local Havenwood Gazette, a paper Thorne was actively trying to buy and gut. Her articles were sharp, well-researched, and always seemed to stop just short of making a direct accusation against Thorne, as if edited by a nervous lawyer. They found her at a small coffee shop, hunched over a laptop, looking tired and frustrated. Kane sat down across from her. "Maria Vance?" She looked up, wary. "Who's asking?" "My name is John Kane. I'm Sarah Peterson's guardian." Her expression softened. "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I wanted to write about it, but my editors spiked the story, said it was unsubstantiated." "I'm here to help you substantiate it," Kane said. "And not just this, everything. I've read your work. You've been circling Marcus Thorne for years. You know he's dirty. You just need the proof." Vance stared at him, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Who are you, really?" "I'm a man who made a promise," Kane said. "We have resources. We can protect you. We can give you the evidence you need to burn him to the ground. Are you in?" She looked from Kane to Reaper, who stood by the door, an immovable object. She took a deep breath. "For 2 years, I've been hitting a brick wall. Every source I find gets scared off. Every lead dries up. Yes, I'm in. What do you need?" The alliance was growing. Next on the list was legal counsel. Reaper had a name: Frank Miller, a former JAG officer who had served with their old commander. He was now a defense attorney in a nearby city, known for being a pit bull in the courtroom. Kane called him. "A SEAL needs help?" Miller's voice boomed over the phone. "Against some rich bully pushing around a Gold Star kid? Son, you don't have to ask. I'll do it pro bono. Just get me something I can use, something solid, something they can't bury." The final piece of the local puzzle was law enforcement. Kane knew the department was compromised, but his instincts told him not everyone was on the take. He had noticed one officer during his visit to the station. A younger man, Officer Davis. He had stood in the background, his expression betraying his frustration and shame. Kane found him that evening as he was getting off his shift. He approached him in the parking lot. "Officer Davis." Davis tensed. "Can I help you?" "I saw your face this morning," Kane said. "You know what's happening in this town is wrong." Davis looked around nervously. "I can't talk to you. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Kane said. "You took an oath. You want to honor it, but you're trapped. The chief, the mayor, they're all in Thorne's pocket. You try to do the right thing. You lose your job, or worse." Davis's shoulders slumped. "So what do you want from me? I'm one guy." "For now, I want nothing," Kane said. "Just your word that if I bring you undeniable, ironclad proof of major felonies, proof that even the chief can't bury, you'll do your duty." He held out a small, encrypted burner phone. "When the time comes, I'll call this number. You'll have a choice to make." Davis looked at the phone, then at Kane's steady eyes. He took the phone and slipped it into his pocket. "Get me the proof," he said quietly, "and I'll do my job." The network was in place. The righteous had found each other. With Maria's help, they began to identify other victims. A small business owner whose store was mysteriously burned down after he refused to sell to Thorne. A former employee of Thorne Development who was fired and blacklisted after reporting safety violations. A young woman who had accused Kyle of assault a year prior, only to have her family threatened into silence. Kane visited each of them. He did not pressure them. He just listened. He told them Sarah's story. He told them they were not alone anymore. He made another promise. "We will protect you," he said to the woman whose family had been threatened. "You will be safe, and you will have justice." One by one, they agreed to talk, to give statements to Frank Miller. The wall of fear Marcus Thorne had built around his kingdom was beginning to crack. There was one more asset Kane needed to secure. On the outskirts of town, there was a large parcel of land that was perpetually flooded. It was a swampy marsh deemed worthless by the county. It had belonged to a Thorne-owned shell company for years until, 6 months ago, it was auctioned off for back taxes. Kane had bought it for a pittance. He wanted a place where he and Smoke could be truly alone, a piece of wilderness to train in. Nobody wanted the flooded land. He had a gut feeling about it. Thorne didn't let go of assets, even worthless ones, unless there was a reason. He had Ghost pull the historical land surveys. The area hadn't always been a swamp. A small creek had been illegally dammed 30 years ago, shortly after Thorne first acquired the property. Kane took Smoke, now healing but still sore, out to the property. The dog, a master of scent work from his days in service, was happy to be out. As Kane surveyed the dam, a crude earth and rock structure, Smoke began to get agitated. He started sniffing intensely at a specific spot near the water's edge, whining and digging at the soft, muddy ground. "What is it, boy?" Kane murmured. Smoke's digging became more frantic. He had been trained to find things: explosives, people, contraband. His instincts were screaming at him. Kane grabbed a small entrenching tool from his truck. He started to dig where Smoke indicated. A few feet down, the shovel hit something hard, not a rock. It was metallic. He cleared the mud away. It was a large, sealed Pelican case, just like the ones his team used. It was heavy. He pried it open. Inside, wrapped in thick plastic, were ledgers and a hard drive. Kane opened one of the ledgers. The entries were handwritten, detailing dates, chemical names, and dollar amounts. It was a log of illegal dumping. Toxic waste, industrial runoff, all buried right here, on this land, before it was flooded. The payments were all signed off by one man, Marcus Thorne. This was the source of his seed money, the dirty secret his empire was built on. He had poisoned the earth and the water to get his start. Kane looked at the hard drive. If the ledgers were this damning, what was on the drive? This was the weapon Miller needed. This was the story Vance could write. This was the leverage that could bring it all down. Thorne must have felt the ground shifting beneath him. He must have sensed the change in the air. The fear he was used to sowing was being replaced by a quiet defiance. From the window, a thermal imager in his hand. He saw the car before it stopped, its engine silent, coasting down the street. Two figures got out. They were not boys. They were men. Hard-faced, professional thugs. Before Kane could even get out the door, they were on her. It was brutal and quick. One man grabbed her, holding her arms. The other, Kyle Thorne, stepped out of the shadows. His face was twisted with fury and a sense of entitlement so profound it was sickening. "I told you," he hissed, his face close to hers. "I told you to stop." He hit her, a closed fist to the face. She crumpled, but even as she fell, she fought back. Her hand lashed out, her fingernails clawing at his face, drawing blood. She was her father's daughter. She would not be broken. He kicked her as she was on the ground. Once, twice. Kane was a blur of motion. He crossed the lawn in seconds, a guttural roar tearing from his throat. It was not the controlled voice of the soldier. It was the rage of a father, a protector. The two thugs saw him coming. They saw the look in his eyes and knew they were out of their league. They dropped Sarah and ran for the car. Kane didn't chase them. He fell to his knees beside Sarah. She was unconscious, her face bruised and swelling. A small trickle of blood ran from the corner of her mouth. But clutched in her hand was a small clump of hair and what looked like skin and blood from under her fingernails. He lifted her gently into his arms. He looked at the retreating taillights of the car. The cold, controlled rage returned, now solidified into something absolute. A certainty. Doc, who had arrived the day before, was waiting inside. He was a former SEAL corpsman, a man who could perform surgery in the back of a bouncing Humvee. He went to work immediately, his movements calm and efficient. "Concussion," he said, shining a light into her pupils. "Possible fractured cheekbone. We need to get her to a hospital." As they waited for the ambulance, Kane carefully took the evidence from Sarah's hand, placing it in a sterile evidence bag Doc provided. "He's a monster," Doc said quietly, looking at the girl's battered face. Kane stood and walked to the window, looking out into the dark street. "The rules have changed," he said, his voice as cold as a tombstone. He turned to Reaper and Ghost. "By the book is over. We are burning his kingdom to the ground. Tonight." Reaper nodded, his expression grim. "What's the plan, Command?" Kane laid it out. It was bold. It was dangerous. It was total. Ghost got to work on the hard drive from the flooded land. What he found was worse than just illegal dumping. It was a blackmail file. Thorne had been recording his illicit dealings with public officials for years. The mayor, the police chief, a state judge. He had them all on tape, accepting bribes, making illegal promises. He had used his own corruption as a weapon to ensure their loyalty. Ghost also accessed the town's emergency alert system and the local public access channel. He could take them over whenever he wanted. Reaper contacted his network. He arranged for a team of state police, officers from a unit known for their integrity, to be on standby 40 miles outside of town. He gave them a time. 10 o'clock. Maria Vance was called. She was told to get to the town hall. A special emergency council meeting had been called by a concerned citizens group. She was told to bring her camera crew. Frank Miller was sent copies of all the evidence. The ledgers, the blackmail videos, the sworn statements from the other victims, and the DNA evidence from Sarah's fingernails, which Doc was couriering to a private lab for expedited testing. At the hospital, Kane sat by Sarah's bedside until she woke up. Her eyes fluttered open. She saw him and tried to smile, but it hurt too much. "Did you get him?" she whispered. "Not yet," Kane said, taking her hand. "But I will. I promise." He leaned in close. "Sarah, I need to ask you something. There's a town meeting tonight. The woman I told you about, the reporter, she is going to show everyone what Thorne really is. The other people he hurt are going to be there. They are going to speak. Would you be willing? Would you be able to say something? A statement we can record?" He saw the fear in her eyes, but then he saw something else. The fire he had seen before. The courage of her father. She nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger. "I'm not scared of him anymore." The town hall was packed. Marcus Thorne was there, sitting in the front row with his lawyer, a smug look on his face. He had heard about the meeting and had come to quash this little rebellion personally. The mayor and the police chief were on the dais, looking uncomfortable. The meeting began. The head of the Concerned Citizens Group, the small business owner whose store had been burned, stood up. He spoke nervously at first, then with growing confidence about the threats and intimidation he had faced. Then the next victim spoke, and the next. A wave of truth began to wash through the room. Thorne's smile faltered. He whispered to his lawyer, who stood up. "This is a circus," the lawyer shouted. "These are unsubstantiated, slanderous accusations." "On the contrary," a voice said from the back of the room. Maria Vance stepped forward, a microphone in her hand. "We have evidence." On the large screens on either side of the stage, a video began to play. It was security footage from a camera across the street from Kane's house. The footage Ghost had recovered and cleaned up. It showed the car pulling up. It showed Kyle Thorne and his thugs attacking Sarah. The video was clear, undeniable. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Kyle, sitting next to his father, turned pale. "That's doctored," Thorne roared, jumping to his feet. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Maria Vance asked. The screen changed. It now showed a close-up of Kyle's face, taken by a news camera as he entered the hall. There were 4 long, angry scratches running down his cheek. Scratches that matched the defensive wounds of a girl fighting for her life. The screen changed again. Now it was a video of the police chief accepting a thick envelope of cash from Thorne in the back of a restaurant. Then the mayor, promising to rezone a piece of protected land for a Thorne development. One by one, the blackmail videos played. The room was in stunned silence. The mayor and the police chief looked like they had seen a ghost. Thorne stood, his face purple with rage, his empire crumbling around him in real time on a projection screen. "You have no idea what you've started," he screamed at Maria. "No, Mr. Thorne," Kane's voice said. It came from the speakers in the hall. He was not there in person. He was with Sarah. But his presence filled the room. "You have no idea what you finished." The screen changed one last time. It was Sarah. She was sitting up in her hospital bed, her face bruised, but her eyes clear and strong. "My name is Sarah Peterson," she said, her voice steady. "Kyle Thorne did this to me. He and his father thought they could hurt people and buy their silence. They thought their money made them powerful, but it only made them cowards. I am not afraid. And you shouldn't be either." As her face faded from the screen, the main doors of the town hall burst open. Officer Davis stepped inside, flanked by a dozen state police officers in full tactical gear. Davis looked at the police chief on the dais. "Chief Miller, you are under arrest for bribery and conspiracy to obstruct justice." Two troopers moved forward and cuffed the stunned chief. Davis then looked at the mayor. "Mayor Thompson, you are under arrest." Finally, he walked down the aisle and stopped in front of the Thornes. "Kyle Thorne, you are under arrest for felony assault." He then turned to the man who had thought himself a king. "Marcus Thorne," Officer Davis said, his voice ringing with the clarity of vindicated justice. "You are under arrest for bribery, conspiracy, illegal waste disposal, and a list of other felonies that will keep you in a cage for the rest of your life." Thorne stared at him, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the pathetic, naked fear he had inflicted on so many others. As the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, the crowd, once silent and afraid, erupted into applause. The trials were swift. He tore apart the high-priced defense. He tore apart the high-priced defense attorneys Thorne had hired. The verdicts came back. Guilty on all counts. Marcus Thorne received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Kyle Thorne received 20 years. The corrupt officials received lengthy sentences of their own. The system, once bought and paid for, had been cleansed by the truth. A few weeks later, as Kane was loading some gear into his truck, one of the students from the day of the first assault approached him. It was a boy who had been in the circle, his phone out. "Mr. Kane?" he said, his voice hesitant. Kane turned. I wanted to say I'm sorry," the boy said, not meeting his eyes. "For just standing there, for filming. I was scared. We all were. But it wasn't right. What you did, what Sarah did, it was brave. I just wanted you to know." Kane looked at the boy. He saw not a coward, but a kid who had learned a hard lesson. "It takes courage to admit that," Kane said. "Don't forget this feeling. Next time, be the one who steps forward." The boy nodded, and for the first time, looked Kane in the eye. "I will." With Thorne's assets seized by the state, the flooded land was officially remediated. The illegal dam was removed, and the creek returned to its natural course. The land, once a toxic swamp, began to heal. Kane, with help from Reaper, Ghost, and Doc, and with a grant from a veteran support fund, began to build. On that cleared land, he built a new home. But he also built something more. A facility The smokehouse, he called it. A place to train retired military working dogs and pair them with veterans suffering from trauma. A place for healing, for both dogs and soldiers. Sarah, now fully recovered, was his first volunteer. She had a natural gift with the animals, a quiet empathy that they responded to. She had found her own purpose in the aftermath of the storm. One cool evening, the work for the day done, Kane, Sarah, and Smoke sat on the porch of the new main building. Smoke lay at Kane's feet, his head on his paws, his breathing deep and regular. He was fully healed, a living symbol of their victory. They watched the sun set over the now healthy land. The silence was no longer empty. It was peaceful. Kane had found it, the quiet he had been searching for. It was not in isolation. It was in purpose. It was in protection. It was in the quiet bond between a man, a girl, and a dog who had faced down the darkness and won. God does not always remove the storm. Sometimes he does not calm the raging seas or silence the violent winds. Instead, he places strength inside ordinary people. He gives them the courage to stand, to fight, and to become the lighthouse for others lost in the dark. He places loyalty in the heart of an animal and a promise in the soul of a warrior. Courage is not about size or age or rank. It is the choice to speak truth in a world of lies, to stand for the vulnerable when others stand by, to believe that justice is not just a word, but a promise waiting to be kept. It is the quiet resolve that says, "This ends now." If this story moved you, please share it. In a world that often feels dark, these stories are a reminder of the light. Leave a comment and tell us the name of a hero in your own life, or simply the city from which you are watching. Subscribe for more stories of courage, justice, and the unbreakable spirit of the righteous. Because for every bully who thinks he is a king, there is a quiet warrior waiting, and he is not alone.